Hello and welcome to a new podcast episode of Nina's Apothecary. I am glad that you are here again, and I am happy that I can tell you something that has personally affected me and what I read, see, and hear, which also affects you. And that is the topic I struggled with, failed at, and struggled with, as they say in today's youth and internet language. And the first and most important and most frequent topic that I hear is also the one that causes the most waves, and that is the topic of losing weight. And on the topic of losing weight, many other factors come into play, such as stress, cortisol, self-care, and so on. This means you will see that one often intertwines with the other. And it is always very important to me that we always consider everything holistically. I can never say, I will only do this and not consider all the other things. This is always very important because our body is also a unit. It belongs together. That means you will always hear from me that everything always interacts, and that is exactly how it is. And now I am thinking about how I can start with the topic of losing weight, because for me it was always extremely important, and I was fortunately raised in a way that we always had wholesome food. We always knew, okay, this is the vegetable, this is the meat. We did not get convenience products. But nevertheless, at some point, I came to this whole topic of not having time, being extremely stressed, wanting to have free time, needing to do sports, a bit of an overload, and it brought exactly the opposite of what I actually wanted and what it should have actually brought. And I see this with many people, that it is similar. And the more they do, the more they try, stress themselves, the worse it actually gets. And this is actually something that has been ingrained in us. You just need to have a calorie deficit. You just need to do a lot more sports. You just need to stress yourself a lot more, and then it will work. But that it is exactly the opposite is firstly somehow hard for our minds to understand, and secondly has only recently been scientifically researched. And research is still being conducted because, of course, everything is still a bit in its infancy in this direction. But I can give you a few examples. What I used to do, I would starve myself because I thought, okay, if I eat little, then I will lose a lot of weight. Always had a growling stomach, always hungry, always a bit in a bad mood. Because naturally, if you are constantly in a calorie deficit, it is just extremely exhausting for the body. Then I did a lot of sports in addition, but not something calm, but really hit units, extremely fast running, very extreme things where the pulse was very high. So I was really only satisfied when it was super hectic. And if I had a moment to catch my breath during the workout, I was already dissatisfied with myself. And this is the third point, this constant stress that you impose on yourself, this dissatisfaction and thinking that you should actually do more and be better. This is just something that the generation of our parents passed on to us, where it was said that only if you work, do, and make 1,000 hours a day, then you will be successful, which might have been true back then, but today is not true at all, because today we notice so much energy in business relationships. And of course, our body is also charged with a lot of energy from top to bottom. And if we constantly send negative things to our body, that is, constantly say, you are bad, you are too fat, you need to do more, then it gets into such a stress. And what happens every time with these bad thoughts? I get a stress outbreak, a cortisol outbreak. Cortisol is our stress hormone. Cortisol can also do a lot of good. We need cortisol. Very important, for example, in the morning when we wake up, the biggest cortisol rise of the day must happen so that we wake up. Super important. But it can also do a lot of bad, because cortisol also causes our blood sugar levels to rise. And that is the misconception in this whole stress not losing weight spiral. When we constantly stress ourselves, we always have these blood sugar spikes. Then insulin is released, and insulin is our fat storage hormone. And then we already know what will happen. And this is connected with so many things. I wore this blood sugar sensor for a long time to really understand the topic completely. When I am in a meeting where it may be about negativity, my blood sugar level also rises automatically. That means, of course, I probably can't always control it. But I can control it a bit also with myself. How do I talk to myself? How do I treat myself? How is my self-care? And of course, also closely connected with nutrition. I made a separate episode on the topic of nutrition and blood sugar levels, Just look back, I will tell you exactly which order of eating is important. What is the best breakfast? I also made a separate episode on which 5 foods I avoid and why. It's also about blood sugar levels, so just look back at a few episodes that was relatively at the beginning. I can really recommend it to you, and yes, I have already told you it all hangs together. So the topic of self-care is also a very important point, because if I don't see myself as a priority and always stress myself and always put my own needs at the very last place or don't consider them at all, why should my body then see me as a priority, and why should it then treat me well? And this includes, of course, buying wholesome food, which may be organic, regional, healthy, that I know what I eat, that I sit down calmly, that I look at my food, that I don't do 1,000 things beside it. So this also belongs to the topic of losing weight, to the topic of self-care, just like walks, putting the phone away, these phones, these reels, these TikToks, as much as I love them, but for example, in the morning after getting up or in the evening before going to bed, please put them away, because there is a huge dopamine release and therefore also cortisol again. That means we don't need that additionally, and especially not before going to bed, because our body believes just from the light that it is bright, that it is day, and then through these actions that it sees all the time. Something new pops up every 2 or 3 seconds, something cool. Our brain can't switch off. Where we are then again at the topic of sleep, because this is also very closely related to the topic of losing weight. I would recommend 7 to 8 hours of sleep to you, because it is simply free, anti-aging, and weight loss. So really treat yourself and don't stress about it. I used to, and that's why the episode is called What I Struggled With. I used to be a master at believing that sleep was just a waste of time. And I really thought, okay, I'll just sleep as little as possible and then get the most done. And that was again a fallacy, because of course I was not as effective since I was tired, not fully rested, not fully regenerated, because my cells were not regenerated. Because many processes happen at night, regeneration processes, anti-aging, detoxification, and if we don't allow that because we are awake for far too many hours, then none of this can happen, and then we will age prematurely. Then we will probably be fatter than necessary, and so on. What I also notice extremely in our society, I briefly mentioned it before, is there is such an overload of things you should do that we always have in the back of our minds, making us feel a bit guilty. Okay, I should drink 3.7 liters of water. I should exercise. I should eat healthily. I should get enough sleep, but I should also get up early and work a lot. I shouldn't stress, but still have a super cool schedule and be totally organized. That means it's a bit split in our society and a bit contradictory. Additionally, I should have as many social contacts as possible because, for example, in the blue zones, these are the areas where people live the longest. Most of them simply have social contacts, and that is one of the commonalities that all these blue zones share. So, how should I fit all of this in? And this is also a point. This is not necessarily related to the pharmacy, but I would simply like to share this with you because it's a bit personal from me, something I have struggled with and still often struggle with, and that is social contacts. I really like interpersonal relationships. When I have taken someone to heart, I do everything for this person. And I often notice this with my 2 or 3 best friends whom I've had for a very long time. But when new friendships or acquaintances come up, or, for example, with men when you meet one, it often gets a bit exploited. This, okay, fine, I like you, you are my friend, and you can get everything from me. I have had a hard time setting my own boundaries, and it still happens to me very, very often, saying calmly, no, I don't have time, sorry. I would love to have time, but I can't. I would love to do this for you, but I can't. To remain calm within oneself and still say no to the other and take care of, I don't know, one's daily life or peace of mind or whatever it may be. And I find this extremely difficult because I stress myself, do everything for the other person, and eventually the cup is full, so to speak, and then it explodes. And I definitely want to work on this. I definitely want to share this with you because this is also a huge point, especially for women, probably mainly for moms, where it's just so basic. Okay, you are a mom, you may have a job, you must look great, you have to manage the household, you have to do everything with the child. That's just the basics, and then you can see what else you can do. I find it extremely heavy and extremely dangerous in our society. And always communicate clearly, and not when you are already at your breaking point, but before that. Like, hey, I would like it this way. Can we maybe change this? Can we maybe do this differently? We can probably remind each other of this and gently point it out, like, hey, maybe you can listen to your own needs a bit more, just as a side fact. So, struggling with weight loss. I used to weigh a lot more, then at times much less. During my absolutely unhealthy phase, I didn't have my period for 2 years. That should be a warning sign for you. Don't be as foolish as I was and think, yay, I don't have my period. No, that's extremely unhealthy for the body and a major warning sign. And of course, one is never completely satisfied with their body. But now I really try, for example, when I do strength training with bands or equipment, which is often enough with just body weight, to take enough breaks between exercises so that my heart rate stays below 145, to take many walks. Because it often helps much more to go for a walk than to stress the body by running with a heart rate of 180, further increasing cortisol levels. And then, in the end, I have fat storage, or what often happened to me was that I caught a cold. So all signs from the body saying, okay, this is some inflammation that maybe doesn't belong there, something I should look at more closely. Then there's nutrition, especially the first meal of the day, whether it's breakfast or lunch, should be without carbohydrates and without sugar. Super important. The order of eating is always first vegetables, fiber, and in at least as large a quantity as the carbohydrates and sugar we consume afterward. This is a really cool trick because they act as a brake for the following carbohydrates and ensure we don't get such a glucose spike and thus not such an extreme insulin release and therefore less fat storage. Walking for 10 minutes after eating is also a really cool hack. And having at least one day a week, if not two, where you say, okay, this is my cheat day or cheat days and I do what I want. I eat when I want, what I want, don't think about it, drink wine, whatever, and then stick to your own plan for 5 or 6 days a week. A really cool hack as well. Stress is always difficult, but put the phone away, do a meditation in the morning, and there are really thousands on YouTube. Just type in morning meditation. There are some that last under 5 minutes. Treat yourself to this time. You'll see the whole day is so much different because once you get to work, you probably can't always control everything. But until you get there, you can influence whether you get up 5 minutes earlier. Treat yourself to this meditation. Start your day with a bit of self-care instead of immediately grabbing your phone and watching reels or TikToks. So, also extremely important on the topic of stress. Perhaps even taking a moment to breathe during lunch break. Just taking a minute for yourself is super important. And especially considering how you talk to yourself in your thoughts, how you stress yourself out, how you look here and there, whether you think you're fat or if you should have done something differently. Just consciously saying to yourself, wow, look at what you've already achieved, what you do every day, be proud of yourself. And then also recognizing, I am great as I am, and I am on the right path to improve myself if that's what I want to do. And on the topic of exercise, as I briefly mentioned, it's also very important. Exercise is just super important, but please, not in the sense that we are professional athletes who have to push ourselves to the limits, because that's not our job. Yes, if you have questions about this, feel free to write to me on Instagram, Anina Milenk, on TikTok, our Frau Apotheker, or simply talk to me in person. I would be super, super happy about that. You can also write to me on the homepage karish.at if you have questions about this. And yes, I say thank you for listening, for watching perhaps, and Karish yourself.